Frank from Download Chi, and welcome. I wanted to go ahead and get into the topic of 3 natural ways you can help deal with autoimmune disorders. This is a very personal subject for me. My lovely wife, whom I love very much, has rheumatoid arthritis and has been struggling with that for a couple of years. One of my close friends and one of the authors of Less is More Press, Maria Laver, she also has a autoimmune disorder, multiple sclerosis, and her book MS You Don't Own Me has been helping a tremendous number of people find natural means to cope with that particular autoimmune disorder. But I wanted to cover today just a couple of quick points, as well as demonstrate Qigong movement at the end of this video that you will be able to use to help manage some of your pain and deal with that whole thing. So if you haven't yet, I would ask you to subscribe to the station. We're trying to get this up at least once a week, a new video. So it'd be great if you can do that. Hit the notification button and you can go ahead and be notified when one of our videos drops. So to get into it, 3 natural ways to deal with autoimmune disorders. Number one is to exercise. They tell you to exercise, but like I wrote about this in the blog that I put up today, telling someone with an autoimmune disease to exercise when movement is painful is pretty frustrating. Many years ago, when I was teaching weekly classes at one of the colleges in Los Angeles, I had done a bunch of presentations to Scleroderma support groups. Scleroderma is a really difficult uh, disease and autoimmune disorder that the skin starts getting hard, and what helps it is movement, but movement hurts. And so I did some presentations at a conference and in a support group, and a bunch of these students came and signed up for my weekly class. And they mentioned how they were getting breakthroughs and how the pain was being reduced, their mobility was increasing, and all these breakthroughs. But the why that was happening was because qigong is an extremely mild movement, so they were able to do these movements, do the deep diaphragmatic breathing that goes along with it, without there being the pain that goes along with a lot of normal exercise. So if you're going to do exercise, which is really helpful for the anti-inflammatory elements that come from exercise, the increase in the mobility, the release of the neural hormones, all that stuff is great. But again, it's like telling a person who eating's great, but tell that to a person who just had some painful dental work or a gum surgery. It hurts to do. So telling a person with an autoimmune disorder, oh, go exercise, it's good for you, when it hurts like hell doing it, that's where people with these diseases really need to find that balance of regulating it, analyzing where their body is at in any particular day. Days when they feel better, push it a little more. Days when they can't even move out of bed, then you do some deep diaphragmatic breathing and qigong visualization while you're lying down. Okay. But anyway, long and short, you've got to find some way that you enjoy to get good, healthy exercise if you're struggling with an autoimmune disease. That is one of the great ways, naturally, to deal with it and cope with it. A second important thing that we need to do is to get adequate sleep and rest. And again, that's an easy thing to say. It's hard to sleep when you're in pain, when you're worrying about your economic situation or your condition. But it's important to do that. In a previous video, I showed a particular Qigong exercise called the fish, which helps with insomnia. But it's important to do whatever we can to make sure that we get to sleep, because sleep allows our body to do what it does best naturally, which is to heal. And so if we can get a good amount of sleep every day, that's going to really help us to be able to cope and deal with the autoimmune disorders. Some of the easy things you can do is to make sure you're not exposing yourself to electronic devices or the internet at least a couple hours before you sleep. Make sure that wherever you sleep, that it's only for sleep. Don't read in bed. Don't eat in bed. You can have sex in bed. That's okay. But anything else, you want to make sure that that's just an area that's kind of sacred for sleep. And another thing you can do is as you drift off to sleep and put the blanket over you and you're getting ready to sleep, is to do deep diaphragmatic breathing. Do some qigong visualizations of, air coming into your system and, maybe your white blood cells regulating themselves and working well, whatever the visualization is. There's lots of different ones. But sleep is such a critical issue that needs to be dealt with if a person is struggling with an autoimmune disease. And the third and final one is emotional trauma healing. Um, this is a sensitive topic because what can happen oftentimes if people start talking about the connection between emotions, trauma, negative thought patterns, and autoimmune disorders is it can slide very easily into the slippery slope of victim blaming. And I have been for many years an advocate for people who are victims of sexual assault or relationship violence, and I think it's terrible. It's a terrible crime to blame victims for what they're going through. And that's not what this is about. There is a very solid body of clinical evidence that shows that there is a direct connection between autoimmune disorders, in fact, many chronic diseases, and our emotional state, our thought patterns, as well as past trauma that we've endured. And so, one of the natural ways that we can deal with autoimmune disorders is to begin to go back and address some of these root causes that may be linked to things that happened in our past, maybe when we were children, maybe when we were young adults and didn't have control over our environment or the situation. We may have suppressed those emotions. We may have suppressed that trauma, which doesn't, magically disappear. It gets embodied in our very cells. There's even a lot of research that suggests that there's generational trauma that can go on. And they've demonstrated this with grandchildren of Holocaust victims who survived. They can have nightmares and have these very similar genetic patterns that come up of trauma, even though they weren't directly subjected to it. And so, if that's true with multiple generations, how much more true is it with our own past? And so, there's a lot of tools, and we don't have time here to get into them, but there's a lot of tools that can help you deal with some past emotional trauma healing. A great place to start, a person I recommend highly. I've read a lot of his books. I've had the opportunity to meet him and see him in person, is Dr. Gabor Mate. He's based in Canada, and he's done a lot of great research on how our bodies retain stress and what we can do to get rid of it. So there's a link in this video, as well as in my blog, to some of his work. Another great tool I suggest is a workbook called the Forgiveness Workbook by Colette G. And this book is a excellent book that you can use to help deal with issues of forgiveness, which can help you heal and help heal relationships. And again, I don't want to get into too much detail here, but the long and short of it is that forgiveness is really about healing yourself and not so much giving the person another path. Okay, so I want to go ahead and demonstrate two simple standalone moves that you can do to regulate your stress and make you feel a little bit better wherever you are. I'm standing and beginning in my beginning Qigong position. My knees are slightly bent, shoulders relaxed, spine is nice and straight and tall. And as you can see, my hands are slightly away from my sides. There's about a golf ball size of space in my armpit. So as I exhale, my hands are lifting up, and then as they get to the top, they're turning in towards one another. And I'm inhaling and coming back to center. Then I'm shifting my weight over to my right. It probably looks like your left on the screen. Slowly floating up on the exhale, hands turn towards one another, come back to center. This exercise, this Qigong movement, you want to do extremely slow. Pretend you're underwater. And this is called placing sun and moon. It actually is a move from Tai Chi, but we're tapping it onto our Qigong stance, so it's much easier. And you just kind of shift your weight slightly from left to right. I'm shifting now to my left. It looks like you're right. Slowly exhaling. Hands get to the center, turn in towards one another, unturn, come back to center. Shifting to my right, looks like your left. Hands reaching up on an exhale, turning in towards one another, coming back to center. This is an extremely calming movement. It could be a standalone. And you basically want to keep your eyes, when they get to the top, on your hands. And when you're moving, you just look straight ahead. And there's no certain number of repetitions you want to do. That's kind of just what you want to do. But if you need a little bit of relaxation, a little bit of stress management, this is a nice, quick, fast one that I like doing. I'm dressed very casually today because the weather's so beautiful here. But this is what I would do in a suit if I've got a meeting or a sales presentation or whatever it is. And then you conclude, like we conclude all of them, you can step in. I'm inhaling, 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 exhaling. And then 3 deep breaths towards my lower abdomen. 1, exhale. 2, and 3. And that is our simple movement of placing sun and moon. So again, in summary, we've got 3 natural ways to deal with autoimmune diseases. One is exercise. The second one is getting sleep, adequate, good sleep and rest. And the third is getting into the emotional trauma and healing that emotional trauma from the past that may have been one of the triggers that caused the autoimmune disease to begin with. So again, as a reminder, I'll be starting a special class that's specifically for people with autoimmune diseases on the 3rd Friday of February, on February 19th, through Moxie, and the link is there below. It'll only be for 30 minutes, so it won't be too strenuous, and we'll get you moving and get things rocking so that you can find another tool in your arsenal to help you deal with your autoimmune disorder. So thank you for joining us at Download Chi. My name is Frank Blaney, and there are resources listed at the bottom. And we'll see you next time.